Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Apologies for the tardiness. Won't bore you with the reasons why, but we are going to have a great show today. Jeff Sintel stopping by. Big night tonight in the state of Georgia when it comes to high school football. I'm happy to be a part of that. Jeff Sintel also covering that too. We'll do all of that on the program. Interesting stuff from some Georgia players yesterday. We will deal with that. And generally speaking, we're going to try to have a good time. It is good to have you with us. I know you're getting ready for a great weekend, one of the final few remaining before the start of the upcoming college football season. So what do you say we get it started in style? DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I've been thinking a lot over the last 24 hours or so about the conversation that dominated the 24 hours prior to that. You know, the injury news for Donnell Washington, Tyke Smith, and the way in which it kind of compounds on some other things that seem to have been going on for UGA. And, you know, we talked yesterday about the fact they're kind of divergent groups on this. They're the folks who are like, next man up, you just got to move on past it and expect everything to be fine. Or the people who are like, typical Georgia, season's over before it even gets here. And, you know, there were just kind of those split categories. And there's also this other category, and admittedly, speaking here for a moment as a fan, admittedly, this is probably the category that I somewhat maybe find myself in, of people who say back to me, you know, BA, I'm not quite so sure that everything's going to be okay here. I'm not quite so sure that Georgia's able to weather this storm and able to, you know, handle all this. But I don't really have any other choice but to believe that. You know, I've invested so much in Georgia football, and I've been waiting for the entirety of the summer to get by here so we can actually have the season. And now that the season's almost here, the last thing I'm going to do is decide none of it matters and none of it's worth following on the heels of what has admittedly been probably more bad news here this summer than most Georgia fans can stand to take. And as I said before, because I do this for a living and because fun conversations are better than unfun conversations, I kind of understand where that feeling comes from of, hey, who knows how well Georgia absorbs all of this, the injuries and the departures, the absences and the things like that. Who knows what the team actually looks like once it takes the field on September 4th, but we're almost in a position where we really have almost no other choice but to assume that everything, you know, kind of might be okay, or at least we want the possibility that might be the case. I'm going to date myself with a reference here, but it almost reminds me a little bit of, you know, the movie from the 80s, The Officer and the Gentleman. You get the scene there, the great one where Lou Gossett Jr. as the the drill sergeant, you know, he's getting all over Richard Gere and basically telling him he's not fit for duty, not capable of doing this. And Gere has the classic moment that is pretty, I think, fitting for 80s movies. I feel like there was a lot of overacting in 80s movies, and I'm not a thespian, I'm not an actor. I don't know what good acting necessarily is, but I do feel like there was a lot of overacting in 80s movies, and this is maybe an example of that, but it's also kind of the feeling of a lot of Georgia fans who are just kind of left to say, what else do I have the opportunity to do but to believe that things might be okay for the Dogs this season? I think we all kind of find ourselves being a little bit like Richard Gere from The Officer and the Gentleman. In fact, here's a reminder of that just quickly to set the stage for all of this.
I got nowhere else to go. I got nowhere else to go. I got nothing else.
I like how he goes downbeat there at the end. I got nothing else. And for a lot of us, we really have kind of nothing else. We've got so much invested in this emotionally that, hey, all you can do after something bad happens is try to turn the page and hope that things are going to get better. Well, here's the good news. If you want to turn that page and if you want to have reason to believe that things for the Dogs may, you know, truly be getting better, I thought yesterday kind of provided an example of that. Now, we're not going to pretend that the injuries haven't happened, and we're not going to pretend, as was the case in 2020. We talked about this on yesterday's show. We're not going to pretend that this isn't a lot to overcome, of course, and in some cases, you know, when injuries pile up, it ends up, you know, being an issue. We're not going to pretend that's not at least a possibility here, but if you're looking to see a Georgia team capable of turning the page, capable of leaning on what it does have without fixating on what it, at least for now, doesn't have, I thought the players that spoke to the media yesterday gave you a chance to believe that. Let me start with Georgia running back Kendall Milton. Milton has always been a very articulate spokesman for his own behalf and now on behalf of the team itself. And, yesterday he was kind of talking about, hey, in light of, injuries that have occurred, the big Clemson game coming up, kind of what do you see going on with your team? And listen, if there is any loss of enthusiasm for Milton because it hasn't maybe been, at least in some folks' eyes, a great summer for Georgia, you really don't get the sense that Milton has that perspective at all. Still very upbeat, still very eager for the season that's about to be here. This is good stuff from the Georgia running back. Listen to this.
With the type of school that we go to, it's a school that has a lot of talent. So everybody, we work for moments. Everybody works to get their chance, and we're super excited for the season. Playing with what we have, and everybody's just excited with the talent that we have on the field. Just excited to attack the opportunity.
I love that at the end. They're excited to attack the opportunity, and that's the thing we kind of talked about yesterday. Of, hey, Clemson's a tough game, even if you do have all your players, right? There's no guarantee that Georgia was going to win that game. And now that you've got a few injuries, there's no guarantee that Georgia's going to lose it. All it really is an opportunity. And the reason why we're obsessed with this kind of stuff is because when you tune in, you really don't know what's going to happen. You can see, the favorite team win. You can see the underdog pull the upset. You can see all of that on any given Saturday in college football. That there is no guarantees. Nothing is a given. All it really is an opportunity, an individual opportunity for a player to take advantage of, a team opportunity to go out and achieve a collective goal, an opportunity for us to see how Georgia does handle the adversity that is a natural byproduct of any season. And Kendall says there, we're just ready to go out and attack the opportunity. We're just ready to go out there and take advantage of the chance that we have. And the subtext to that is, we talked on yesterday's show, that opportunity is not lessened just because Georgia is not currently at full strength. And I think that's really important to hear from Kendall Milton on that. And then our buddy Mike Griffith asked Kendall a question of, hey, you had a chance to go through the scrimmage on Saturday. Of course, Georgia gets ready to do another one of those here this weekend there as well. You had a chance to go through that, had a chance to see all of that. And when you watch your team in action in a more competitive environment, different than a normal practice, full pads on, really hot, when you see that team kind of going through all of that, getting ready to be on the field against a different color jersey coming up on September 4th, what's the look that you see from your team? What's the feeling that you get when you look at that team? Now, admittedly, what Milton saw on Saturday, we've actually subtracted a couple of more guys off that, at least for right now, in the persons of Washington and Tyke Smith. But once again, what Kendall says about what he saw from his team last Saturday, I still think these words resonate in light of just the kind of downbeat nature that most Georgia fans have kind of found themselves in light of a kind of a recent string of bad news here. Here's more from Kendall Milton.
It just showed me how talented of a team we have, how many weapons we have. Just seeing everybody on the field between the offense and the defense side of the ball, it's crazy how much competition there is in that whole practice type atmosphere because, it's the best of best on both sides. So it just shows how much talent we have on both sides and potential we have as a team. And seeing that scrimmage, it just made me, 10 times more excited to get on that field and, really get into action.
So a phrase that you hear me say a lot, and I'm going to continue to say it a lot, is when it comes to college football and roster management and how you build the kind of roster capable of winning a championship, numbers are always going to be more important than names. If you fall in love with any one name, you're bound to be disappointed. That player might get hurt. In some cases, elite recruits actually at the college level don't perform the way that we think they might. Any individual name is potentially bound to disappoint you because football is a very difficult sport to predict. But the one thing that you can really rely on are numbers. That if you put enough elite prospects into any one position group, the chance of finding a few that can play and a chance of kind of never being in a situation where you get caught without someone and when you get caught with a hole on your roster, if you trust in numbers will be there to back you up over and over and over again. Sometimes individual names have a tendency to disappoint. And in a roundabout way, that's what Kendall Milton's also saying there. He looks around, offense, defense, everything else in between. He's like, wow, look at all these guys who are capable of playing. Now, who are the stars that will emerge and who'll actually do the best from a statistical standpoint or whatever else? We don't know that yet. That's still to be determined. And frankly, will enough of those guys do that Georgia can actually win a championship? We certainly don't know that either. But Kendall Milton says, hey, even in light of some of the injury stuff that's gone on, there's a whole bunch of numbers that you can pay attention to, and I think that's kind of important to remember. For Georgia fans who want some good news, who want to be able to turn the page, you really get a chance to do that based on what Kendall says and what some other guys say. In fact, let me give you another example of this here real quick. Chris Smith, Georgia safety, who's talking about the fact that he's also now rotating some at star with Tyke Smith being hurt and everything else. If you're going to start pivoting towards that game against Clemson, the good news now is Georgia's players aren't necessarily shying away from talking about that. It's not like if you asked them about that in April, they would have said, we got a lot more to worry about before we get ready for Clemson. No, all of a sudden now, we're only a couple of weeks away from the game. It's not too soon to start talking about Clemson. And in Georgia practices, you get the sense that it's now time to start really game planning and get ready for an attack that has the chance of beating the Tigers coming up on September 4th. So for Georgia fans who are just kind of ready for the next thing after kind of some of the recent stuff hasn't quite been what you want it to be, the fact that Chris Smith more than ready for that game coming up against the Tigers, another reason to feel good here on this Friday. Take a listen to this.
We all know Clemson's a great team, They got a lot of good players, but so do we. We focus on ourselves right now and focusing on how we're able to get better. And when that time comes, we'll put a game plan together for Clemson.
Listen, I love the idea that they're already thinking about that, ready to talk about that, and getting ready for that game. Georgia fans have been through a lot. I'm not going to pretend they haven't, even if I'm one who says that weathering that storm may be a little easier than some have given it credit for. There's no doubt it takes an emotional toll on you. So the fact that yesterday Georgia players were talking about, what's next, I think that's a nice next step in this process. I'll invite you to the DawgNation YouTube page to check out all of that for yourself. Now, let me do something completely different for a minute, totally different topic here. I thought that Pat Forty from Sports Illustrated had a very interesting piece where and I'm going to do more of this for SEC through later on, but he's ranked the most intriguing coaches in college football. And the guy that comes in number 5 on his list of most intriguing coaches is Kirby Smart. We all kind of understand why. Smart is a pivotal figure in that Forty suggests that eventually, it's almost a certainty that he'll eventually hoist a national championship trophy. We just don't know when. And at the risk of being negative here, I'm also going to highlight something else that Forty says about Smart as far as maybe why for him as a coach it hasn't happened yet. Now, we've told you a million times on here before that we are not of the belief that this is a national championship or bust season for Georgia as a program. This program is going to be around for quite some time to come. And as a coach for Kirby Smart, that's also not true there as well. Georgia stands to be a big contender for national championships and playoff berths and everything else for many years to come in the future. I think it's very difficult to argue against that. That's just objectively true. However, even if I push back on the idea that it's not championship or bust season, that is not the same thing as saying there isn't some pressure on Smart to do more of what he hasn't done enough of or do less of what he's probably done too much of. And I want to focus on the last part of that for a moment. What you kind of want to see less of from Kirby Smart. I thought that Pat Forty gave a little bit of a harsh analysis of Smart, but I don't think it's unfair and I don't think it's untrue. And I do think it's the kind of thing that folks will be watching from above, 10,000 feet away on this program here this year. Let me read you a couple of sentences here. Pat Forty, Sports Illustrated, ranking Smart among the most intriguing coaches in college football, and says the missing piece to maybe win a national championship, the biggest box to check, his in-game coaching and the ability to stop having one meltdown performance every season. Now, I think in-game coaching stuff is very difficult to measure, right? We criticize coaches for their bad decisions, but sometimes it's hard to notice their good decisions because you don't really know how things could have otherwise been. So I think the in-game coaching part of this is a little bit of a nebulous thing to consider. But the idea that there has been one meltdown per season, unfortunately, that's a lot easier to measure. That's a lot easier to go back and recall of, Georgia was beating Alabama at halftime last year, but got completely trounced in the second half of that game. Go back to the 2019 season. Georgia got completely walloped in the SEC championship game against LSU. Go back to the 2018 season. Lost on the road in ugly fashion to LSU again. 2017 in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Got beat up really bad against Auburn. I won't say anything about the 2016 season because that's really kind of before Georgia got its program up and running, but 17, 18, 19, 20. For a program as talented as Georgia, for a program that is on the shortest of lists of teams that can win the national championship, there are too many games that result in a final score in which it appears that Georgia just wasn't very competitive in the game. That's got to change, right? And I don't think it's unfair to put that on Smart here this year, that you're looking to see Georgia take that next step. which means being back in the college football playoff after having not done that in 2017. But it also means not seeing that. Georgia can't lose a game by 3 touchdowns this year, right? I mean, at a certain point in time, you got to just make that a part of the early growth stage of this program and something that you eventually graduate from. Now, running the table, going 15-0, few teams are capable of doing that. But being competitive down to the final whistle, down to the final buzzer in every game this season, I don't think that's asking too much. I think it's a really interesting piece from Pat Forty. We'll look later on at some of the other coaches that show up on that list around Kirby Smart. But interesting analysis from a guy like Forty, who's been around the block a couple of times, for a coach like Smart, who's clearly one of the pivotal figures in this sport for 2021, and a guy that a lot of very well-known media types are looking to see, can Kirby Smart take that next step? My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, or thereabouts, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, the page at DawgNation.com. We kind of beta testing the app here a little bit too. A lot of you have asked, hey, can you do DawgNation Daily on the app? And the honest answer I have to give is I have no idea, because I have no idea how apps work. But somebody smarter than me has said, yeah, we might be able to do that. So we're giving that a shot, and that's been really fun all the way around. Just good stuff. Glad to have you with us here today. And a huge thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. By the way, make sure you check out our friends at Kroger there as well. Of course, you're getting ready for the school year. Most of you actually been in school now for, going on a month or so. So it's all been seemingly going well. You're getting stocked up on those books and the supplies, and of course the lunch and the stuff and the snacks. I told you before, my kids eat, a metric ton worth of snack, it seems like, every single week. And if it wasn't for Kroger, I'd be in pretty rough shape on that. So you yourself can make sure you're in good shape for the school year that's just kind of getting going. You get those wish lists from the teachers. They need new things. That's all available for you there at Kroger, too. You can check out all of that. Kroger.com/school for more details. Kroger.com/school. They'll give you a lot more details on all of that. Speaking of more details, we got more details to come before we're done on today's show. A lot of UGA recruiting stuff. Our buddy Jeff Sintel will stop by in here a little bit. I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to this. Let me just give you a quick shout out for this coming up on Sunday. We're going to do this scheduled to begin at 8:30 p.m. It's our edition of the show we've been calling KM Squared with Georgia running backs Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh. They're actually going to be live this Sunday night, scheduled to start at 8:30 p.m. Going to be live, and they're going to be taking your questions there as well. So we just heard some really good stuff from Kendall Milton from yesterday. Kendall and Kenny both are just terrific personalities and huge fan favorites on this Georgia roster for good reason. You've been watching them on the KM Squared show now on the DawgNation video channels for the last few weeks. This is a completely different version of that, though, live. Your chance to interact with them. That's going to be fun. Sunday night, scheduled to begin at 8:30. So please make sure you get a chance to check that out. I think that's going to be a really cool moment to maybe get your question answered by a Georgia running back, something that a lot of you would certainly love the chance to do, and you will get a chance to do that later on this weekend, Sunday night for that. So that's all the DawgNation video channels, so make sure you check that out there. For now, though, let's talk some more Georgia football here. Let's go around the doghouse, delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. So let me revisit yesterday for a moment, because I want to make a completely new point today, but I want to build off what I said yesterday. So here's what I said yesterday, that I think that fans at times have a tendency to overrate the importance of injuries. That when you lose, even a collection of injuries, that when you lose a tight end, when you lose a defensive back, things like that, it gives you pause, and sometimes that collection of injuries does prove to be too much to overcome. I think 2020 was an example of that for Georgia. But not always, and most of the people who don't have the emotional tie to Georgia that we do, for the most part, still treat Georgia as the same kind of team. For instance, I heard Paul Feinbaum yesterday. Now, maybe you like Feinbaum, maybe you don't, but he is certainly the kind of person who's very much the kind of person we talk about in discussions like this. Someone who's a couple hundred miles removed from the bubble of DawgNation, someone who's just kind of a hot take type guy who, just kind of rolls with the punches here. And Feinbaum was asked directly yesterday if the Georgia injuries caused pause for him to not, make a pick for Georgia to make the playoff national championship. And, Feinbaum hemmed and hawed a little bit, but eventually kind of said no, that he still views Georgia as a championship team. Because here's the assumption, whether it be, just kind of old school talker like Feinbaum or analytic type guy, math nerd, whatever else, the assumption they make is that if Georgia loses a player, it has a Georgia caliber player, a UGA caliber player, ready to step in and take the place. Eventually, could you have too much attrition? You probably could, but for the most part, people make the assumption that UGA has a certain standard of play, and whichever name is slotted into that spot, you're going to get a UGA standard of play at that position. That's just kind of the way people operate. However, that is not to say there is nothing that Georgia couldn't overcome here for this upcoming season. I want to give you an example right now of something that I do think, if this ends up being true, and there's no reason to believe that it will, but if it does end up being true, this would be the kind of thing that Georgia could not overcome. And this is the kind of thing that I believe would put an end to Georgia's championship chances. Our buddy Mike Griffith wrote about this in a roundabout way at DawgNation.com the other day. He was looking at Todd McShay, the ESPN analyst, and McShay's got his top 50 big board out right now. Handful of Georgia names on there. Adam Anderson on there. I believe Anderson is rated the highest of any of the Georgia players. Nakobe Dean is on there. There are a couple of other Georgia names amongst that top 50. But I'll show you this on the screen, something that Mike wrote, having perused the list for McShay. Mike Griffith writes that Georgia quarterback JT Daniels was not among the 6 quarterbacks that Todd McShay listed among the top 50 overall NFL draft prospects. You can read that story from Mike Griffith at DawgNation.com. Now, let me tell you this right now, and I think you're going to agree with me on this. You may be able to overcome an injury. You may be able to overcome a player absence. You may be able to weather some of that storm. If JT Daniels isn't one of the 6 best draft-eligible quarterbacks here this year, then Georgia's not in the college football playoff, and Georgia's not winning the SEC, and Georgia's not winning the national championship. And it's not my intention to put too much pressure on Daniels or anything like that, but he's a quarterback at Georgia playing for his NFL future. He's already got a lot of pressure on him. I can't do anything to add to that. When you look at what Mac Jones did for Alabama last year, what Joe Burrow did for LSU the year before that, what guys who haven't won national championships but have been fixtures in the college football playoff, like Justin Fields getting his team there a couple of times. When you look at Trevor Lawrence, who won as a freshman in 2018 but got the Tigers back there in 2019, 2020, you see the role that quarterback plays in all of this. This is a quarterback-driven sport to such a huge, huge degree. It would be, and listen, who knows if McShay's right or not? I mean, this is very, very early in the process. I think even he and Mel Kiper and guys like that would admit they have a tendency to change this stuff a lot over the course of time before we get to the moments when this stuff finally really matters. But if JT Daniels is not one of the 6 best quarterbacks in college football, then you're watching the playoff on television. You're not going to that stadium and attending that game. You're not seeing the Georgia Bulldogs there in that spot. That's the kind of thing that could really bring an end to Georgia's end-of-season goals, I believe. And it's also one of those things that I think, Georgia this year may actually prove, it does have the kind of quarterback in Daniels that can go out there and play at the highest overall level. So pretty interesting stuff. I thought you could read more about that with our buddy Mike Griffith there at DawgNation.com. But very interesting. JT Daniels, some suggesting maybe not quite the season that Georgia fans want him to have. I think it'll be fun to see JT potentially prove those, I won't call them critics, but maybe those naysayers or doubters, whatever you want to call them, Daniels get a chance to prove them wrong when the upcoming season begins. Of course, that's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza, and we love Marco's Pizza because it's great pizza at a great price. I'm talking about the great care they take to make the golden crust and put those 3 cheeses blended together on top of that. It just sounds good to even say that. Certainly looks good when it's delivered right there to you, or when you stop in the store and pick it all up there as well. Just a fun thing to think about when you head towards the weekend. Look at that old world pepperoni on the top of that pizza there, or the good-looking sausage and everything else. But listen, don't dream about Marco's Pizza. You can be eating it today for lunch or all throughout the weekend there as well. And you can get great savings. How about a bundle that includes a large one-topping pizza, a pizza bowl, which, by the way, is the pizza flavor without the crust, which is kind of a cool thing right now, and you get some cheesy bread. So you get the large one-topping pizza, the pizza bowl, and the cheesy bread, all for just $21.99 right now. That's really cool savings. You can take advantage of that. Go to the Marco's app or the Marco's app or Marcos.com. Of course, participation may vary. Additional restrictions might apply, but Marco's app, Marcos.com to find out a lot more about that. All right, it's great to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily. We'll do a lot more in our program. I've even got a really fun collection of golden shoes. On Friday, sometimes we end up doing kind of a golden shoe dump where we'd like to sort of get to a lot of the ones we haven't gotten to yet. So we'll kind of catch up on some of that today before we're done. That'll be really fun. We'll honor some good Gator haters in our audience. But let's get serious for a moment. Let's take care of some business. Georgia recruiting all kinds of stuff to address on that. So let's do it all with Jeff Sentell as we go on the road with him, assisted today by AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
On the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today on DawgNation Daily. And Jeff, a lot I want to talk to you about, but obviously I know you're just like me, very excited about high school football kind of officially being back. We've had a couple fun nights worth of games on the Corky Kell Classic. Of course, I'm looking forward to being a part of that tonight. 30th annual Corky Kell Classic rolls on. I'll be back in my old stomping grounds, Bobby Gruen Field in Gainesville for Gainesville and Johns Creek. That's going to be a really fun game. I know you're going to be a part of the terrific game between Jefferson and Rabun County, and obviously names of note for UGA there with Malachi Starks and Gunnar Stockton, but the full schedule is here, and it's back, high school football in Georgia. And for me, this goes beyond just the guys that we'll talk about that'll play at UGA or even play against Georgia on some other SEC team. There are a lot of guys who are looking to fulfill a college dream by how they play this year or just looking to finish their high school life on a big note. I mean, it is as much fun as you can possibly have, and it's back, and I'm sure you're like me, just glad to know you're going to be under the lights somewhere tonight.
Yeah, Brandon, man, big night for everything, man. I know it feels like it just got started rolling. We've seen incremental pieces, but, you know, for me, I'm going to call it an old school, old-fashioned slobber knocker, one of those games that the whole state will be watching. And Jefferson Rabun does that for me, but, you know, I want to make sure I make a special moment here to say, man, it'll be good to hear that you're back in the booth. I think you'll feel at home on Friday night. I wonder how many blind squirrels or golden shoes or jean shorts references might slip into your broadcast because it comes so naturally to you. But hope everybody checks out BA on the mic and on the call. And you got to get some sort of signature line like you are looking live, or, you know, this year is a little bit more room than my palatial studio inside DawgNation World headquarters. But it'll be good to hear you on the call tonight.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and for those of you that are not aware, I am doing play-by-play tonight for the Gainesville-Johns Creek game, which I do think is going to be a terrific game. And it's one of those things where, you know, here on DawgNation Daily, you kind of get like resort casual version of BA. I'm typically wearing a golf shirt. I'm actually wearing shorts. People can't see that behind the desk, but I'm, you know, usually pretty relaxed doing a show like this. You know, on the Friday night deal, you got to be kind of like broadcaster BA. You kind of got to get the you got to make sure the hair is combed. You got to make sure that you are, you know, ready to go out there and take care of business for the folks who are watching that game. So maybe a slightly different side of me, more of the broadcaster type BA, but a ton of fun nonetheless, because as I said before, it's just great to see. And Jeff, I know you're like me. You'll be obviously at the Rabun Jefferson game, and I'll be over there at City Park for the Gainesville Johns Creek. But I think so many of us also tuning in Peachtree TV tonight and CBS46.com after that for the North Cobb Buford game, which is like, I mean, it's like an Under Armour All-American game taking place on a Friday night, just given the super team that North Cobb has put together, and of course Buford's as talented as they always are. I mean, this is good TV tonight for sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, for Georgia fans that want to pay close attention to that broadcast, not sure that I've been told that Denylon Morissette still a couple of weeks away with his wrist injury.
Okay.
So the fabulous Georgia receiver won't be up for that game. You know, Buford's got so many guys, a lot of young guys to pay attention to. You know, there's a lot of good things going on. My mind, Brandon, is still spinning from I've done some pregame interviews with a lot of the guys for the Jefferson Rabun County game, and I'm going to give a credit to shout out to Jabo Shaw at Rabun and Gene Cathcart at Jefferson, because folks, they're like in week 12 in cliche form this week, man, or just like coaching mantra right now. Brandon, I've heard these gems within the last 48 hours. I've heard it's the best 11 players that don't win the game. It's the team with the best 11. And then I've also heard it's not the most valuable player that wins the game. It's the player that makes the most guys valuable in the game plan.
I like that.
I don't know if I've heard some of these before, but like, you know, we might need Noah's Ark out there at Jefferson Rabun tonight. I'm hearing that it'll come up a cloud, to speak like my grandparents used to. It'll come up a cloud tonight in Jefferson. But, man, I just can't wait. And this is something that I want Dog fans to hear, Georgia fans to hear. And you ought to want to just go run through your garage right now and hit somebody. But Malachi Starks told me about how much better he's gotten for the 2021 season. And this is the guy that ran a 10.55 in the 100 in the spring. I think he long jumped like 24 feet. I mean, Malachi Starks might be the closest thing to Matthew Bowling that Kirby Smart ever gets on the Georgia football team. And he said to me, and he's really very, very humble, very cautious, very, not very, he's a young man that's always going to belittle whatever he does on the field and always raise up his teammates. That's just the way he's been his whole life. But Malachi said if the Malachi Starks that finished 2020, the player that guy was, had to face up and line up against the player he is now in 2021, then that 5-star from 2020 that took his team to the state championship game would be in a lot of trouble, because that's how much better he feels he's gotten, and he's made the most of his off season to get ready for, which Jefferson Folks Field is a strong state championship contender again. They lost. The only game they lost all year was to Marist in the state championship. And it's funny, the little Gunner Malachi back and forth those two guys have. They've crossed paths a lot on all-star teams and all-American teams and a lot of teams in their youth. And last year was the first time Malachi ever beat Gunner football field in a competition. And I think he was like 0-5 or 0-6 coming into that game. And the one thing I hope folks will realize, and we'll write about the game tonight on DawgNation.com, but the next time that Malachi Starks and Gunner Stockton are on the same football field together, they will be teammates for the Georgia Bulldogs, and I know that should probably get a lot of folks excited.
Something else that's gotten folks excited here this week, Jeff, is the decommitment from 5-star wide receiver Luther Bird, no longer part of the Oklahoma class. And listen, I've told folks before that I think that Georgia fans ought to take Missouri seriously in this recruitment. I think Eli Drinkwitz right now is a better recruiter than Dan Mullen is, as a for instance on this. But obviously, on shows in the past, I've said before I need to see something else from Burden to make me feel like Georgia is kind of a real player in all of this. Well, a decommitment is certainly an example of that. How much do you think the decommitment from Oklahoma changes the calculus of this? Now, I'm assuming the Sooners are still a part of the recruitment on down the line here, but, I mean, it can't be bad news for Georgia, right, that Burden is now officially on the open market?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not bad news for Georgia. I think it opens the door. But I'm going to be honest here, Brandon. Well, first of all, you got my mind spinning on Eli Drinkwitz at Florida. I mean, man, you talk about something that would ruin a Friday. Georgia fans in DawgNation do not want to even perceive the fact of a smart, savvy, up-and-coming coach like Eli Drinkwitz out of Florida. But I want to be honest with Luther Burden, because I'm not one of those headline jockeys and, I want you to click this, I got to get in on this story. I think Missouri had every bit as much as a reason that turned Luther Burden's head as Georgia did, perhaps even more so. I think Missouri's trying to put together Kevin Coleman, another 5-star level talented receiver, along with Luther Burden, and maybe totally energize and supersize their program, especially in terms of their big play potential on offense. But I look back on a lot of things, and I go, okay, George Pickens was just a confident guy. Dominic Blaylock was a once-in-a-million recruit. Jermaine Burton had known Georgia for years and years, and they'd been recruiting him for the longest time, and he had so many relationships with guys like William Poole and Chris Smith in his early years that really made sure Georgia happened, and Jermaine Burton wanted to stay local. But I want to say this. I don't know if Georgia has done anything up to this point to earn the commitment or signing of the nation's number one receiver. Now, I certainly think Georgia can do something this year with the magic numbers of 3,500 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, 1,000-yard receiver, 10 or 12 touchdowns for their number one receiver. Maybe it's a guy like Burton. But I think Georgia needs to put together the offense. Like, people are always wondering, what's happening with the wide receiver recruiting this year and the year before. I think A.D. Mitchell is going to play like a high 4-star All-American player. He's going to make that 2021 recruiting class look good. I think the same thing for Jackson Meeks. But I think for Georgia to get into the chase, to land the nation's top 5 receivers every year, I think we've been through a lot of them, Brandon. Andre Green, Evan Stewart, Luther Burden. These things are going to keep happening when Georgia just tries to trade on a promise and potential and an expectation rather than the reality of, hey, go look at those NCAA wide receiver leaders. Go look at those SEC wide receiver leaders. Go look at the NFL first-round draft. Georgia's going to have those Bulldogs showing up in all those lists and populating those lists for them to have a shot at a guy like Luther Burden year in and year out.
And I don't think that's unfair to say at all, but, I mean, the industry sort of seems to think that Georgia's at least one of the final three here with, as you mentioned, Missouri, and maybe if you want to include Oklahoma, maybe still in it. At least that's the sense that I seem to get from just trying to follow the online chatter. And there's also some talk of, hey, you know, Georgia provides something that the closer to home school Missouri does, in the fact that it's a bigger brand, it's close to a major population hub in the Atlanta area, and it's the kind of thing that if you care about name, image, likeness, things like that, you'd have a chance to maybe cash in on that at a place like Georgia, and someone like Burden maybe paying attention to that. So I appreciate your honesty and your candor, and I think that you're probably correct that the Georgia offense is going to prove itself worthy of receivers like Luther Burden. But, I mean, Georgia's at least in it a little bit, though, right?
Oh, yeah, I think they're in it. I mean, I think he's going to come back to Georgia and give them an official. I think by that time Georgia's passing game needs to be clicking on a lot of cylinders when he does so, and I think that maximizes Georgia's chance. And I guess I want to make sure I streamline what I'm trying to say, because, you know, Missouri has an angle there where they're local, somewhat local to Luther Burden. Well, for Georgia to go way out of state and pull in the nation's number one receiver type, a five-star receiver type, for Georgia to have that type of reach, not at a linebacker, not an offensive lineman, not even at a quarterback, definitely not as a running back, because Georgia's done this years and years and years, but to go pull a five-star wide receiver, you know, like Evan Stewart's a great example out of Texas. I mean, look at the schools that he's considering. He's considering all the high-flying, passing, incredible offenses, and the schools that put the ball in the air, as we remember that phrase from Georgia recruiting for years and years and years. I think that's what's necessary there for Georgia in terms of getting a guy like that and having him really, truly consider Georgia. We've been talking about this for years. I keep saying it. I think the biggest difference between Georgia and Alabama over the past few years is what the home run hitters that Alabama has stacked up at wide receiver.
Yeah.
But it's funny you should mention name, image, and likeness, because I had an interesting conversation with a family this week, and it's actually happened twice over the last 2 or 3 weeks. You know how, Brandon, the script is, if you're a really good high school quarterback or high school football player, that also you're getting that Major League Baseball scouting attention, where you've got this thing where, you know, I might go in the first round or I might go in the second round,
Sure.
And then you go, you know, the plan has been happening for years and years where, you know, hey, go to college, you go play pro baseball. Well, you
Sure.
know, pro baseball will pay for your degree. They'll give you $2 million in your pocket. And then if you hit 118 in Dubuque, Iowa, and you can never hit the curveball or you can never hit the strike zone, well, then, hey, you can just go back to college football and you can be $2 million richer and still try your hand at both sports.
Sure.
Well, that's maybe changing a little bit, Brandon, with this name, image, and likeness. I think some families have noticed a guy like Bryce Young getting $1 million. I think they've noticed the Quinn Ewers story coming out of Ohio State, where now coming out of Texas to Ohio State, where now he's the face of this health drink or whatever with some sort of national appeal and national branding. All of a sudden I'm going to make a ton more money in Major League Baseball and then go to college football. All of a sudden that those waters aren't as crystal clear, and it's not a no-brainer situation anymore when a young man can go play football and then make $1.5 million or something like that, or at least six figures, healthy six figures, even to bypass their baseball dream. So that's another way where, you know, you were talking about name, image, and likeness and branding and being next to a bigger market, a bigger brand. That's another way where that's kind of changing one of our old staples of, you know, what type of young man that throws 94 miles an hour as a pitcher goes and plays college football first.
Sure.
Most of the times they go try Major League Baseball first. And I think that's another way where this era is changing with all these radical changes for college football.
Interesting to hear how those prospects and their families are thinking about securing their financial future. And, of course, that's something that you need to be thinking about there as well. And one of the ways you do that is life insurance, especially if you're in charge of taking care of somebody else. And I actually have a couple of kids. So for me and my family, life insurance is something that we definitely think about. And when you think about life insurance, I want you to think about my friends at AAA. Of course, AAA assists us with On the Road with Jeff Sintel each and every Friday, but they can also assist you when it comes to your own life insurance needs there as well. They can explain the entire process to you, and there's a lot of ways to get in touch. You can give them a call, 866-695-0222. That's 866-695-0222. You can stop by, see them in a local AAA office, and let one of those insurance agents talk to you about all of the life insurance options that you have there, or you can go online. It's AAA.com/life. That's AAA.com/life, and find out all the ways in which AAA can serve you when it comes to your life insurance needs. Jeff, let me give you a couple of rapid-fire questions here, then we'll let you get out of here on a Friday. And, of course, we always appreciate your time. You mentioned Andre Green a little earlier. He dropped his top 6. You see that there on the screen right there. Georgia right in the middle. Georgia's always in the middle of these graphics. Hayes Fawcett does so many of them. I don't know if Georgia just works better in the middle, but it's amazing how frequently they get the middle position here, including for Andre Green Jr. right there. A very good-looking edit all the way around. Jeff, we've talked about Green before, of course. Where do you think things stand right now that Green has kind of whittled down his finalist even more here?
Yeah, Brandon, that was one of the updates we had for Andre Green. And Brandon, we talk about this a lot. You see the talent maybe in May or June, and then the recruiting rankings start catching up. I think at one point Andre Green was a top 25 receiver. I see other sites are now putting him among their top 10, top 5. I think he's a special football player. We did on Hedges this week. We've gradually seen a slide for Andre Green from maybe the number 3 to the number 4 to the number 5 top target. I just think, and there's a lot of opinion out there right now about Andre Green that Clemson's going to be really tough to beat in this recruitment. They kind of weren't the Energizer Bunny in his recruitment at the forefront, but here lately, I guess the Tigers have been closing really fast because they have a reputation for putting first-round receivers in the league and throwing the football around, and I think that's just more things. I think the one thing that kind of gives Georgia fans a little bit of a can we go higher than the bronze medal here or the silver medal here is that it sounds like Andre Green Jr. is going to wait for a few weeks, get some time into the college season before he makes his decision, and maybe by that time, that jet pilot for the University of Georgia will feel like he's got like 19 Tomahawk missiles out there on the edges to carve up some defenses, and that offense will be flying along.
Interesting stuff. Let me do one more thing here real quick. Obviously, Georgia, Texas A&M have kind of overlapped a lot when it comes to this 2022 class. The last week is an example of that. Bear Alexander gives you top 2 and includes the Aggies and the Dogs, and once again, another good-looking social media edit shares that message. But you've also got Deion Bowie, who took the next step, and some wondered if he would after he decommitted from Georgia, knowing his tie to Nick Williams and knowing he'd taken some visits to College Station. Would he pledge Texas A&M? And Bowie has now done that. Listen, it's great that Bowie's committed to Texas A&M. My assumption is this is far from done. I guess it's great that Bear Alexander's including Georgia in his top 2. I still think that's a pretty big challenge, although I did enjoy the positive update you gave us on that a week ago. What do you make here about Alexander and Bowie and the news that's come out with them in the last 7 days?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I know Georgia fans want that pedigree of having a 5-star cornerback in the class. It seems like Georgia's, thoughts on there is, Georgia's probably going to try and very, very hard to bring in the recruitment of Jaheim Singletary, the talented corner, 5-star corner out of Jacksonville, Florida, former Ohio State commitment there, and you got Bowie now. I don't think things are done with Bowie, but if I'm being honest, I got to say that I think Georgia's chances with Big Bear Alexander are a little bit warmer there than with Deion Bowie. I think Deion's going to come back to Georgia. Georgia will get another visit, and Georgia will still have a chance there with Mr. Bowie as well. But Texas A&M is certainly becoming a player in all things. It's like I think the number of former Georgia analysts or personnel directors or quality control guys, I think they're, not even counting a guy like James Coley now. I think the number is around 4 or 5, and I would expect Texas A&M to be a school that's going to consistently be a top 5 school in the recruiting rankings and all these chases for these great players for years and years to come. It seems like they're adopting that model that has been coming along from Alabama to Georgia, now to Texas A&M, with a lot of quality kind of recruiting pieces on the board. I would be very hard pressed. I would love to see what the audience and what most folks feel if they think the chances of Georgia signing both Singletary and Bowie are still strong, or one or the other.
Yeah, I'll just say this on my own behalf, Jeff. And listen, I'm not going to pretend my knowledge is the same as yours. You're the expert on this. I'm not. But I believe if I was going to fill out my own online prediction, no matter what it looks like today, I guess I would say Alexander more likely Texas A&M and Bowie more likely Georgia. And that's just my assumption. I've even said that on the show this week. That's not an expert analysis. That's just my own personal opinion. But, the idea that, Alexander was always going to be a tough pull for Georgia, I believe that. I'd love to have him in this class, but I've always felt like this was a high degree of difficulty. And something like the Bowie, I don't know, man. I mean, if Georgia really wants to win this thing, are they going to lose a player from Kirby Smart's hometown simply on the basis of Nick Williams? To me, and I'm speaking here as a fan, just giving a knee-jerk opinion, this is not meant to be expert analysis, but as kind of a knee-jerk opinion, I mean, if Georgia really puts their back into this, are they going to lose a Deion Bowie commitment? I guess I would assume they probably wouldn't.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. If I had to think about my most realistic scenario, let me throw this caveat first. I think a 10-0, 9-0 Georgia that's scoring 45 points a game would be the greatest recruiting machine that Georgia has ever seen under Kirby Smart, in terms of everything clicks with what all the goals and dreams and hopes that this very talented roster has for the season. I would think that a lot of 5 stars would be in play for Georgia, perhaps even more so. But I don't know, man. If I had to sit there and think, I would probably wager that the young man from Texas coming over to Georgia, I think the odds there are probably a little bit stronger than the young man from Georgia, not going all the way over to Texas and staying in. Because I mean, it's funny, and you hear this from the recruits now, is that Nick Williams was a loss, because Nick Williams was kind of, I can catalog 8 important players on Georgia right now where Nick Williams was important in that recruitment. And I think what I'm hearing now is, I've even heard this from the lips of a couple of recruits, is that the new director of on-campus recruiting, David Cooper, who used to be at Louisville and used to be at Florida, is effectively, let me stress that term, replacing a lot of those feel-good moments and interactions with all these top-tier recruits now that Nick Williams used to. I think you add into the fact with Nick Williams that he is from Bainbridge, and that he knows a lot of the folks that Deion Bowie calls some of the most important decision makers in his life, and some of the most important people in their lives. That's where Nick Williams played. A lot of family and friends from that area. He knows the family really well. He knows trainers really well. I just think that is and then there's the age gap, which is, not as extreme as in other places. And I think David Cooper, who was recently recognized by 24/7 Sports as maybe one of the top people in college football under the age of 30. I think it was 40 under 30 or 30 under 30 or whatever. But David Cooper was recognized there. So was Georgia's another director or on-campus recruiting executive, I would say. She was also recognized, Katie Turner, as well. Georgia had 2 folks in that 30 under 30. So Cooper's doing a very good job, from what my reporting tells me, in kind of replacing that void that Nick Williams, or replacing that role that Nick Williams did so very well for the Georgia staff. That's somebody besides the position coach, somebody besides the head coach, somebody besides the coordinator. You hear a lot of great things about David Cooper from guys like Christian Miller, guys like Mikael Williams as well. So I think that, and I keep coming back to this one point that I want to make very clear, is I don't know if anybody's going to withstand Georgia's recruiting tug-of-war, recruiting Georgia's gravity, let me say. Should everybody look at Georgia and see a Georgia team averaging 45 points per game, and then also shutting down folks defensively as well? I think that's a Georgia that we have not seen yet on the recruiting trail. If Georgia can do that, I'm going to double down on something I've said for the longest time with this class. It doesn't matter about the $80 million that was spent, which was spent very well. I think the most effective recruiting Georgia will do in 2021 is going to be on the stat sheet and on the scoreboard. and on all highlight plays that show up on SEC Network and ESPN. I think that's where Georgia is going to change a lot of opinions. It's going to change a lot of narratives in terms of what direction this program is going. And I think that's what the program really needs.
Strong words from Jeff Sintel. Great way to close things out. Jeff, thanks for being here on the road, assisted by AAA here today. We'll look forward to reading all your coverage of the great Rabun and Jefferson game that's going to take place tonight, and, of course, high school football all throughout and how that impacts the recruiting news there as well. We'll look forward to reading it at DawgNation.com and, of course, seeing you back here on DawgNation Daily, assisted by AAA again very soon there as well. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Yeah, Brandon, we're hearing weather reports about rain tonight in Jefferson, so it might not be Malachi or Gunner playing like Superman. It might be one of those young men playing like Aquaman in order to win that game tonight, man. So it'd be interesting to see.
Should be indeed. Jeff, thanks so much.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
You got to save that stuff for the story, right? The superhero analogy, you got to save that for the story. But nonetheless, good stuff from Jeff Sintel all the way around on the road. Assisted by AAA. We're going to try to pick up the pace here because I know we're kind of working on a long one right now as far as the show goes. But listen, I'm glad to have all of you with us no matter what. And hopefully you're having a good time with it there as well. SEC Through. Let me first, though, give a shout-out to my friends at the Finish Long Drink. Talk about having a long one. A Finish Long Drink, good way for you to enjoy a nice weekend. It makes it feel like a long weekend, even if it's only 2 days. The Finish Long Drink can do that for you. If you're watching me on TV tonight, then settle in and have yourself a Finish Long Drink right there on the couch as you do so. Whether it's the Long Drink Cranberry, some of you have told me you love that. The Long Drink Strong, a lot of this audience I know loves that for the obvious reasons. 8.5% alcohol by volume. Of course, a Long Drink Zero, the Long Drink Traditional. It comes from Finland in the 1950s. A really cool story about how it was when the Summer Games were in Helsinki. This was kind of created as a way of celebrating that. It's been a part of celebrations ever since here in the United States of America for the last couple of years, and now for you wherever you are, especially all around the state of Georgia. So check out thelongdrink.com, and you can find out where you can pick yourself up some Finish Long Drink right now as we head towards the weekend. So many of you have told me you love it, and I'm glad that you do. It's ready-to-drink cocktail right out of the can. It looks like a beer, but it's not. It's just pop the top and drink it and enjoy. You can pour it in a glass. You can drink it out of the can. You can do whatever you want. It is the Finish Long Drink. All right, so I talked a moment ago about a pretty interesting piece from Pat Forty, SportsIllustrated.com. This isn't the top coaches in college football. This is what 40 ranks as the most intriguing coaches. I don't have time to go through all of the list, but I want to go through a couple of these. First of all, at number 1 on his list, he has Steve Sarkisian, the former Alabama offensive coordinator, now head coach at Texas. And I don't think enough people have made this point. And I feel about Sarkisian a little bit what some of y'all have heard me say about Lane Kiffin. As a play caller, Lane Kiffin should be credited with completely changing the Alabama program. He brought the offense offensive philosophy anyway, that program has kept even after he's been gone now for a number of years. He transformed Alabama, should get credit for that. Steve Sarkisian, kind of the same way, was maybe the best offensive coordinator I've ever seen last year with what he did for Alabama. But much the same way with Kiffin, where I love him as a play caller, not sure about him as a head coach. I think in the case of Sarkisian, what he did for Alabama as a play caller is very difficult to replicate. In fact, I don't believe that Bill O'Brien this year will be able to as he steps in Sarkisian's shoes there. But as a head coach, man, are we sure? Texas is a big old brand with a lot of money invested in Sarkisian, but we're talking about a guy whose career head coaching record is just 46-35. And even pushing aside the personal issues that caused him to lose his job at USC, this is a guy who's not exactly winning at a high clip even before that, right? So I'm not saying he won't succeed. I'm saying that 40 describing him as intriguing is certainly true. This may be a guy who's truly rejuvenated himself because of his time working with Nick Saban. But you got to be careful with this when it comes to Saban. When these guys that kind of go through that car wash and come out way cleaner on the other side, is it just their reputation that's been cleaned up, or are they actually better coaches? That's the thing I think you got to be careful about. Sarkisian is certainly intriguing, and we'll see how much of this Texas investment really does pay off in him. Number 2 on this list is Luke Fickell from Cincinnati. Of course, Cincinnati, a preseason top 10 team right now. And here's the one thing. Oftentimes, bowl wins are overrated. We look at bowl games as some sort of momentum that gets carried into the new season, and frequently that's just not the case. That's something we believe must be true, but it's frequently not the case. However, Cincinnati's a top 10 team, and as many of our audience has pointed out to me, certainly some of our video commenters have mentioned this before, Cincinnati gets the chance to play at Notre Dame this year, right? So not only will Cincinnati likely have a pretty record at the end of the year, but there's a chance they also get a pretty big trophy on the wall as well when it comes to a chance to win at Notre Dame. Now, maybe they don't win the game, but that's a big opportunity to win that game. There's also a chance that in hindsight, we look back and say, wow, Georgia's winning in Cincinnati was actually a better win than it was probably credited for at the time. I mean, the fact of the matter is Georgia fans just don't think a team like Cincinnati from the American Athletic Conference is very good. They don't think it's legitimate the same way an SEC team is. And no matter what Kirby Smart says, Georgia fans just are going to kind of feel that way. But if you see Cincinnati on the heels of being a top 10 team a year ago, be a top 10 team again, and if they were to beat Notre Dame on the road, Fickell, who 40 calls the second most intriguing coach in college football, not only will his star rise as a coach, and maybe he moves on to a bigger and better job, all of a sudden the Georgia winning in Cincinnati from last season, maybe it does look like, oh, that was the start of something against a defense that was really pretty good. I mentioned Kirby Smart at number 5 on this list. The name above him is Jim Harbaugh. I want to make this point kind of quickly, although sometimes with me, quick is in the eye of the beholder. So you've heard it said before that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And I think in the case of like Kirby Smart a moment ago, earlier in this show when I was reading what Pat Forty wrote about him, and Forty was questioning his in-game coaching skills and questioning his need to avoid the disastrous performance, which unfortunately seems like Georgia's had at least once in each of Kirby Smart's seasons dating back 2016 and in each of the seasons since 2017 when Georgia's been a real factor as a playoff contender. They still get blown out once a year, and you just can't do that if you're going to be a true championship contender. And some Georgia fans may, not like the idea of that. National writer kind of taking a jab at Kirby Smart. But there is something worse than that. And it's the stuff that Jim Harbaugh is currently dealing with. I was thinking about this the other day. You can go back in time, 2016 or so, listen to old shows, and in the SEC through and stuff like that, man, we were talking about Jim Harbaugh all the time. We were talking about his satellite camps coming to the South and how they were trying to plant a flag down here. And, it kind of worked a little bit, at least for a time. They got Nico Collins, good receiver out of the state of Alabama. That was a receiver I really liked. Briefly got Aubrey Solomon, although it didn't really stick. But we were talking about Jim Harbaugh all the time. And Harbaugh's this big thorn in everybody's side, even Kirby Smart, because they kind of came in to their jobs near the same time. We don't talk about Jim Harbaugh anymore at all. Harbaugh is totally irrelevant. So as I said before, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is probably indifference. In college football, it's the same thing. The opposite of praise isn't really criticism, because when you criticize someone, you're criticizing someone because you think you ought to be able to praise them more and you currently can't. The opposite of praise is just irrelevance, not covered at all. And Harbaugh went from a few years ago being the most talked about coach in the sport to now national shows, our show. He's just not a relevant figure whatsoever. So Smart may have his critics every now and then, and Smart may have some folks kind of, putting some pressure on him from every now and then. But better to be in that position than to be in the position of a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who doesn't generate any chatter whatsoever. A couple other stories I want to just run through real quick. Actually, let's just do one more story here. Actually, we'll do 2 quick ones. So there's bad news coming out of Kentucky where I guess 6 Kentucky players, I'm going to read the statement here. So I guess 6 Kentucky players have been charged with burglary. What the Kentucky Athletics Department says is, and I'm reading this from seaofblue.com, Institution Athletics Department takes matters like this very seriously. We are closely evaluating the issue before determining the next step. Mark Stoops, the head coach, says, I'm aware of the situation that arose today. Out of respect for the legal process, I cannot comment on the charges. We have been aware of this matter since March, withheld the players from team activities while a student conduct review was being held. Based on the outcome of the review, the players returned to activity in June. We're evaluating the current situation as we receive more information. So I really... It's apparently first-degree burglary charge, and it's going to be filed in court today here on this Friday. Incident took place in March at a private party. The players are R.J. Adams, an offensive lineman, a running back, Robert McClain, cornerback Andrew Phillips, wide receiver Ernest Sanders IV, defensive back Vito Tisdale, and defensive back Joel Williams. Listen, this show really isn't the crime beat. I have no idea if these guys are guilty. I have no idea if this is all just a gigantic misunderstanding. I don't have any kind of opinion on that one way or another. I just don't know enough about it to know. I bring this up more from the football sense of that you've got a lot of positive talk around Kentucky right now. There are a lot of people who believe that Kentucky maybe the second best team in the SEC East here for this upcoming year. And you kind of wonder whatever's going on here, how much of a potential distraction that causes for a Kentucky team that's really trying to be, I've talked to Missouri on today's show. I actually think Missouri's probably better than Kentucky, but Kentucky wants to be better than Missouri. Kentucky wants to threaten Florida. We had Kentucky fans in our comment section at SEC Country Live on Wednesday saying they think that Kentucky's going to beat Florida here this year. So a little bit of a PR setback, if nothing else. We'll find out how much more serious than that it gets, but a little bit of a PR setback here for the Wildcats, who are trying to be a little bit of a player for the upcoming season. By the way, speaking of Kentucky, one more quick story. So former Kentucky quarterback, and I say that in air quotes because he's only there about 5 minutes. Really, you think of him more of a former Auburn quarterback, Joey Gatewood, is actually going to UCF to be reunited with his old head coach there, Gus Malzahn. So it's kind of funny for Gatewood, who once transferred away from Malzahn because he didn't make him the starting quarterback, has now transferred back to Malzahn after Kentucky didn't make him the starting quarterback. So hopefully for that young man, he can eventually find himself a home and be happy in college football. But for now, we'll make that your SEC through. All right, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, let's turn our attention back to Georgia. And sometimes on Friday, to be completely honest with you, we're forced to catch up on some fun golden shoes that we haven't had a chance to give out earlier this week. So let me do a couple of fun edits on social media. Then I want to show you a video. Can we see one of the edits here first? Our buddy Mad Dog. Now, I guess you got to be careful. This is sensitive content right now because there was the gator attack of the day at the Gator Zoo type thing. But Mad Dog writes in to say that when you try to run away from a fight that you can't win, you see Kirby Smart on like the gator tamer here pulling that tail. Yeah, y'all don't mess with those gators. I said this the other day. Gators are fascinating because they move slow until they don't. They have a way of kind of lumbering, but then all of a sudden they're moving pretty quickly and suddenly. But good stuff by our buddy Mad Dog, who racks up another golden shoe win there. I do like Kirby yanking on that gator tail. I think that's pretty good. Also, our buddy Ben Green, who always shows up in a big, big way. He gives you the hashtag branding as he presents the new Gator logo to be revealed on October the 31st, 2021, which is the day after the Dogs beat up on the Gators. And you see a little bit of a Gator there, the worse for the wear, with the Band-Aid on and the bloodshot eyes, getting beaten up by those dogs. Ben's always really good, and that's a really good one there as well. I love the idea of that. And then more in the category of just good parenting, our buddy Josh Johansson shares this. I think we have a little bit of – can we have a little bit of audio for this? No audio. So showing child enjoying the Georgia cheers there and having a good time doing all of that. That's just good parenting all the way around there with some good stuff there as a youngster gets a chance to enjoy some Georgia highlights and getting ready for that upcoming season. That's always a great thing to see. There is a chance we've already done this as a golden shoe now that I think about it, but I feel like we haven't. Maybe we have. Either way, good stuff here on a Friday. Let's go ahead and wrap things up. And, of course, I will see you tonight, 5:30 p.m., Peachtree TV, streaming on CBS46.com as well. City Park in Gainesville, historic Bobby Gruen Field for the Red Elephants as they host Johns Creek. What a fun game that's going to be. Of course, after we're done on Peachtree TV tonight, also a huge game. Our buddy Matt Stewart and Rusty Manziel will have the call of North Cobb. And my goodness, what a super team the Shane Queen's put together there for North Cobb here this year. And, of course, Buford always loaded up and ready to go. That's going to be a terrific, terrific matchup. North Cobb and Buford tonight going to be a lot of fun. So high school football is back. Jeff's going to be there. And Jefferson will all be trying to dodge the rain, I guess, a little bit. I haven't really seen the forecast too good. I'm scared to look at it. But hopefully that'll all be taking care of itself. So y'all get ready for a great weekend. Of course, I know you're getting ready for a great weekend, October 30th, 2021. Because 71 days from now, on that date, Dogs beat the lousy, stinking Gators again. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video. In addition to being a little bit of a late start today, we were also a bit of a marathon show, so we are extraordinarily late. I cannot spend way a long time on comments because I got a radio show to get ready, and I got all kinds of stuff to handle here. So let's do a couple of comments, and we'll get ready to bounce out of here after that. Started on Facebook first yesterday. The reason why I know I did, because some of the Facebook folks were complaining that I never start on Facebook. Did do that yesterday. Let me do YouTube, and y'all, I got to be quick. So if I'm still here after a couple of minutes, y'all got to tell me to get off the air because I got 10,000 things to do. Let's see what else. Worm says JT Daniels is going to be much better than Bryce Young, and by a long shot. Here's the thing. I mean, you kind of need for that to be true, right? Bryce Young, with a brand new offensive coordinator, they're replacing, most of their wide receivers with the exception of John Mechie. I don't think it's asking too much for JT Daniels to be better than Bryce Young. Now, you say by a long shot. I guess that kind of language, let's wait and see on that maybe. But I don't think it's asking too much. Go out there and be better than an inexperienced Bryce Young. Same thing that Jeff was bringing up before about for a guy like Andre Green, who Jeff says Clemson's going to be really hard to beat. And I understand why Clemson's had great recruiting. But when you think about guys like Joe Nagata and others, there's no obvious reason why those guys ought to be better this year at the receiver position than what Georgia's going to be. Now, they've got a much better track record, but the point here is there's no reason if you're Georgia you should just concede that and say, well, listen, receivers going to go to a place like Clemson because they just do a better job of developing receivers. That's what Georgia's trying to change this year. It's trying to show that it can have a quarterback every bit as good as what Alabama's has been. It's trying to show you that it can have receivers that are every bit as prolific and productive as what Clemson's has been. It's not easy to do that, but if Georgia's not planning on doing that, then what has all this conversation over the course of these last 8-9 months, what's it been about? Because if you can't match that productivity, then you're going to watch them play on TV come January. And let's see what else. Nature Gator always checking in. Jeremy says the comment section is wild. Yeah, Jeremy, that is always going to be true. It's always G. Gray stirring people up, too. What's funny is G's a relatively mild-mannered guy. But man, he gets people stirred up in here. And he just fights a battle on every front. I mean, you almost got to kind of respect it, right? Like, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, G. Grace, one of our YouTube commenters, big Alabama fan. Like, I mean, he's sort of like, you ever watch somebody at a blackjack table, they're like playing like 5 hands? Like, I could never do this. I can barely count to 21, so I'm doing well just to play my own hand. But you got some people who just like sort of occupy the whole table, and they're like just doing, hand, and they're just, hitting. Like, that's the way that G. Grace argues in YouTube. He's got about 5 arguments going at one time, like he's playing, blackjack at a table by himself. Let's see what else. William Bird says Mullen, when he gets his new facilities, will start giving Kirby more of a fight in the future. Yeah, I mean, maybe you're right about that, William, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, go back and look at, the Mullen years at Mississippi State. Relative to expectations their recruiting actually went down. And, what he's doing at Florida right now is actually fairly well in keeping with what Mullen's history has been as someone who's only an average recruiter. See, here's my fear, that as a person who does not like Florida, as a Georgia fan, after 2 consecutive coaches that were not really great recruiters, Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, it's almost like, and a lot of Georgia fans will tell you this, that you just keep Dan Mullen in place because he's never going to be a true long-term threat to Georgia. And, listen, after last year, I guess now I'm of the mindset that you got to just go out there and obliterate scorched earth. But the one thing that you would assume that comes next for Florida at some point in time is Florida realizing that their inability to recruit with the very best programs in the country is going to be an Achilles heel, and eventually they fix that by getting the kind of guy that can recruit there on a regular basis. You gotta kind of assume that's true. Christopher Rule says Emory Jones going to run for his life given the offensive line issues at Florida. Could be the case. J-Dub says Harbaugh to Georgia after Kirby. Boy, J-Dub is stirring it up with that. I don't know about that, J-Dub. Let me go over here to Facebook here for a moment. We'll get a couple over there. Hold on, y'all. On the Facebook. Eventually. All right, this is loading slow. I apologize. Now we're going. All right, on Facebook. Matt Rugavina says, while I fully expect Darnell to play, let's give our guy Brock Bowers some airtime. He could be George Kittle 2.0. Yeah, I mean, I know there was some chatter. I think Kendall Milton talked about Brock Bowers yesterday. Plenty of reason to believe that Bowers could be in shape for a good season. But also this, and I've told you this a million times, I am truly a big believer in tight ends that have been at Georgia now for a little while. Rylan Godey is back healthy again. I think that Godey deserves a look. John Fitzpatrick has played a lot for Georgia, and I think that he is a reliable target. Fitzpatrick was going to play no matter if Gilbert Washington, whomever else, Fitzpatrick was still going to play, and he was still going to be targeted occasionally to the extent that Georgia's going to target tight ends at all. I mean, Fitzpatrick's going to be targeted. So not only, can I listen to a discussion about Brock Bowers, and I definitely can, but I can also listen to discussions for guys like Godey and guys like John Fitzpatrick, for sure. Philip Jordan Wells said, who do I have tonight? Is it Bayside or Valley High? That rivalry, I'm more into like the West Beverly versus Beverly rivalry than the Bayside versus Valley. Which one did the Say by the Bell crew go to? Was that Bayside or was that Valley? That was Bayside, right? Valley was like the rich kids they didn't like. Is that what that was? I'm probably more acquainted with the Beverly versus West Beverly rivalry. Jermaine King says, where will I be stopping to eat on my way? And so I'm actually trying to not eat a ton right now. I'm actually I'm actually trying to lose a little bit of weight. So no good restaurants for me really right now. No good restaurants really for me. Brian Lindsay wants to see how Camden does. Always a great program there. Nick Roundtree asking about the conversation about a DawgNation invasion to St. Simons. So, good news, bad news. Bad news is probably won't be in St. Simons because I am working on Friday nights this year, so I just physically can't be in St. Simons for something like that. But the good news is I think we will have some sort of announcement coming for Georgia, Florida here at a certain point in time. And, this is one of those things where admittedly it kind of frustrates me that I can't be two places at once because I would love to be Friday night before the Georgia-Florida game, partying out, having a good time with a bunch of Dog fans there on St. Simons, but I will be working. As I said during the interview with Jeff, broadcaster BA will have to put on some clean clothes and go try to take care of some business. So I'm looking forward to that too. That's going to be a great time. But that's one of those moments when you'd like to be two places at once. Bill Sanders says you need to come south and see some real high school football. We're going to be doing some real, what you call real high school football. We're going to get down south before the year is done. Somebody asked me if we're coming to Buford for a game. Buford's on TV tonight against North Cobb. I'm not doing that game. And we also have some flex scheduling we're doing there as well. So I think the fullness of the schedule is still being finalized. Kevin Cook says, why do you ever acknowledge a troll? I think part of the issue is I try to keep the comments moving. And so when I look down, I have a tendency to just read whatever I'm looking at. And I'm pretty good, and this has been true forever, I'm pretty good at filtering out something that just doesn't need to be read. But, by the way, Steve Highland says he may not be a top fan, but he's a top long drink fan. That's pretty good, Steve. I like that. But sometimes the troll acknowledgement, and plus I like G. Grace, even though, and the people that argue with him, I think kind of halfway like him too. But part of the acknowledgement of the trolls is that whatever I look down and see is oftentimes what I just read. Joey Robinson says, do you think that UGA being ranked 5th in both polls, that even what they lost, they would still make the playoffs? Lost one, they'd still make the playoffs. I think that there's going to be a very strong argument for, let's say Georgia goes 12-0 in the regular season, and just for the sake of conversation, let's say they were to lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game and be 12-1. That's one of those things where you have to watch out for the Clemson team you beat week 1. Would Georgia be in the playoff over a team they beat head-to-head? Most of us would say they should be. But also, y'all always make fun of me for talking too much about Texas A&M. But think about this. What if Texas A&M's only loss is close to Alabama? It is entirely possible that one of Georgia's big contenders for a playoff spot could actually be Texas A&M, because I do believe that Texas A&M has a great chance of going 11-1. I don't believe they'll win the SEC West. I do believe that'll be Alabama. But I believe an 11-1 team would have a chance to truly compete for the college football playoff. So I think you got to pay attention to that. The answer is, I would say, more than likely, yes, but y'all better just be ready for a big, intense debate. And some of the things that some of the people outside the bubble of DawgNation are going to be saying are probably going to be some things that you don't like. All right, thanks for being here. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. You can find them online, rsandrews.com today. Also, have a great weekend. I'll see you tonight on TV it's 5:30, by the way, early kick for us, for Gainesville and Johns Creek. Good one between North Cobb and Buford after that. And, of course, back here on Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We will talk to all of you then.